The 2014 federal budget, tabled earlier this week, is being called a stay-the-course budget. Its focus is on eliminating the deficit. There's very little new spending aimed at combating apparent softness in the Canadian economy. I talked to Finance Minister Jim Flaherty yesterday about the budget and asked him how he weighs those two responsibilities, stimulating the economy against fiscal prudence.
Well, the first thing is keeping the economy on track. So we don't increase taxes, and we stay on the track toward a balanced budget. And that keeps interest rates modest. And all of that creates a willingness to invest, which creates jobs. So that's sort of one level of looking at it. The other level of looking at it is some people don't match jobs. And so we have a new apprenticeship loan program where apprentices, for the first time actually, will be able to borrow money for no cost. We don't do that for anybody else. and to encourage them to finish their red trade program so they can move around the country. And then we do the mentorships, and then we do the internships, and we make them paid internships. And then we put money into the universities and colleges. And after that, you know, I'm not sure exactly what we can do. It's what we can think of doing.
Your job is to foster an environment that makes business confident and expand.
Yeah.
Businesses have seemed less confident than you might expect, given that we're on fairly good footing. The U.S. is recovering. What's your sense of what's going on out there and what you could do to try to stimulate business to act?
I think it's coming. I feel better about it now than I did a year ago. And I think that businesses are starting to expand. I see it in some of the numbers in terms of purchasing of equipment and new processing by Canadian enterprises. And they're not all big shots. I mean, there's lots of small and medium-sized enterprises, and we've given them a tax break. And I see that they're actually using it, because I get that reported to me because I see the tax results. So that's encouraging. I think that give it a few years in Canada and we'll be just fine in terms of our manufacturing sector.
So on the jobs front, one of the big fights that you set yourself up for is on the Canada Jobs Grant. The provinces have resisted this since you announced it a year ago. Your message to them is, we're going to do it. So if you're not on board, we're doing it for you. Why go that route?
I never set myself up for fights. It must be some other minister who did that. Listen, this is federal money. And I grow weary of provinces telling the federal government, you shall do this and you shall not do that with federal tax dollars. We have a goal. We want to make sure that that young person who is trained in A, B, or C, at the end of it all has a job. And if you can't demonstrate that to us, province A or B, then you have a problem. We don't have a problem. We have the money. And we'll do it. And we'll do it directly with employers. And we'll, in fact, cut you out if we have to, because you're not getting the job done. Or if you are getting the job done, you're not reporting it properly. And some of them, quite frankly, were using the money for other purposes.
We've talked before about provincial finances, and you know firsthand it's not easy to run a big province, but they're a mess. They're a mess. You're getting back on track, but most provinces are not. So what's your message when you meet with the premiers?
Well, I was speaking with one of the premiers yesterday. It's worrisome. Particularly a few of the provinces are quite worrisome. And a couple of them are big provinces, and they're not taking care of their fiscal situation, and they're making promises that I know as an experienced finance minister that they cannot keep. And they will be short-lived governments for that reason, because when you disappoint people like that, you don't last. And these are not provinces without resources, and these are not provinces without the ability to deal with their own fiscal situations, to reduce taxes and pay down debt. I mean, when I was the finance minister in Ontario, and that was a long time ago now, but the budget was $65 billion. Today it's twice that. And, and I wonder in Ontario whether public services are twice as good as they were 10 or 12 years ago. I doubt it.
You have, in fact, federally, after a period of increasing the public service, worked to make program spending ever smaller. Do you want to leave government smaller than you found it?
Yes.
That's your aim?
Yeah, I think government got way too big. In Canada, it's way too big in the United States too. It's in France, and most of the Western democracies have governments that are way, way too large. If I even look at the Department of Finance, which is, a very responsible central agency in the government of Canada, we started with 1,100 people, and now I think we're down to 700. And we're doing more than we ever did. And we're doing it better than we ever did, arguably. I think we are. And you just don't need that many people. What you need are the right people around, with everybody having the right motivation and wanting to work. And nobody knows that. It's not the politicians. Nobody knows that better than the deputy ministers and the assistant deputy ministers. They know who produces and who doesn't.
Still ahead, the second part of my interview with the finance minister on plans for the surplus, income splitting, and disagreeing with Stephen Harper. Over the past 3 years, the federal government has cut an ambitious path towards balancing the budget, and by next year it promises to be there. For the first time since 2007, in fact, we'll have a surplus. I talked to Finance Minister Jim Flaherty yesterday, and in the second part of our conversation, I asked him what he plans to do with that surplus.
I think, first of all, we have to get there. And once we're there, and I think I'm assured we will get there, then I think we need to sit back and really think about it. And I think Canada's changed. I think we're away from the time where people think that you're a better government if you spend more. I think a lot of Canadians have looked at provincial governments and municipal governments and said, actually, you're not a better government when you spend more, when you're irresponsible, because my taxes go up, and I don't like that. So I'm still a fiscal conservative, and I'd be inclined to pay down debt. And you never know what's going to happen along the road. 5 years, 10 years from now, I don't know what's going to happen in different parts of the world, but I want to protect my own country. And if we are in a good fiscal situation, then we will be strong like we were in the last crisis.
You'll get pressure from your colleagues.
I sure will.
How do you resist that pressure?
Oh, I get pressure all the time from my colleagues. I told you about the rubber stamp I have that says no, which doesn't make me very popular. But, it's part of being the finance minister, and I don't mind, actually. I like being the minister of a central agency of government and being able to see the whole thing and see where we're going. That's what it's really all about. And we're on a good track here. I mean, Canada's on a really good track, and I'm proud to be a Canadian.
One of the promises that has been made by your government is on income splitting. Once there's a surplus, you'll look at income splitting. Are you revisiting that idea? Are you liking it less than you did before?
Well, I'm revisiting it in my own head, but I don't decide these things by myself. When I look at the studies and I see who benefits from income splitting, sure, there are some people who benefit quite a bit. But a lot of middle-class people will benefit in a very minimal way. And so I wonder about the efficacy of the tax measure.
Another tax break that was good politics, bad policy, I think most economists would agree, was the GST cut. Do you stand by the cut in that consumer tax?
Yes. It created a stimulus in the economy, which was a good thing. And it also did something else, and this is more psychological or political, whatever. It showed people that governments can actually run for election and say they'll reduce your taxes and do it. And I was in the Harris government, the Eves government, and You know, at the end of every government, even our government now is saying we reduce taxes by $3,400 for the average family of 4 and so on. Well, they don't. They're looking at their 2-week pay stub and they're going, I don't know, workers' comp went up and this went up and that. You know, it's hard to communicate that kind of thing. But if you go to the store and something costs 2% less, I get it.
You've been finance minister a long time, 10 budgets in. I don't get the sense that you're living or dying on the next election. In other words, you sound to me like somebody who's very focused on what you believe in and less on the politics of things these days. Does that make you a better finance minister?
Oh, I don't know.
Is it easier to be kind of true to what you really believe when you've been doing it this long and you've delivered some good
Well,
numbers?
I'm sure Prime Minister Harper would say that I've always I'm one of the few ministers that's always been difficult.
Stuck to your guns?
Yeah, no, and if I don't agree with something, I make my views known. And he hasn't fired me yet.
You seem like you don't want to pat yourself on the back, but how do you want to be remembered? How do you want history to remember the U.S. finance minister?
Well, I hope, putting Canada back on the right fiscal track. I don't put myself in the category of a Margaret Thatcher or anything like that, but the same type of thing, that taking a country that was going in a mistaken direction and getting it going in the right direction and dealing with some crises and dealing with them responsibly and seeing the country succeed over the next 10, 20, 30 years based on sound fiscal policy. Because quite frankly, I don't think people across the floor from me, who I all know, and I like some of them, would differ greatly in what we're doing. You saw even yesterday when I did the budget, they weren't criticizing me really. A couple of them even came to the reception. It's just not, they know that what we're doing is the right stuff to do, and I hope they will do it also.
You might call it a very Canadian situation.
Yeah.
All right. We'll leave it there. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.